1 Samuel chapter 7 today. The last chapter ended with kind of the call to the town of Kiriath Jearim to come get the ark. And they do this. And it remains there for 20 years. And this town, as opposed to the one before, treats God's ark, God's presence, with respect. Now, there's all these subtleties that unfortunately get lost in our English translations. It's not the fault of the translators. It's the reality that this was written in Hebrew for the people of the time when it was written. And so it's not that we can't overcome this, but there's just these hyperlinks and subtleties that, again, it just takes a little bit of study to see. And thankfully, there are so many great scholars who do that work for us. Again, I'm just going to recommend the Bible Project. You've heard me say that already. Anyways, the word guard here, they guarded the ark. That's not just simply like a security guard kind of thing. This word guard is actually one that's a priestly word. It's used later talking about the Levite duties. It also has connections earlier in the Old Testament. This guarding is that they're not just kind of keeping people away, but they're doing this work of respecting the ark and communicating that. The events surrounding the capture and the return of the ark seem to spark a revival of commitment to Yahweh within Israel. They return to allegiance to Yahweh alone under Samuel's guidance. Stop worshiping other gods, stop relying on them for fertility, for example. Baal and Ashtaroth were fertility gods. And so it's like, don't rely on them for good harvest, rely on Yahweh. Israel assembles at Samuel's instruction, basically for a recommitment service. The Philistines, they hear about this, Israel's gathering. Now, whether this was, hey, they're gathering to fight us, or hey, they're gathering, here's an opportunity for us to beat them again and further cement for this generation. Remember, it'd been 20 years since the last time, at least we have record that they battled together. So here's the Philistines maybe seeing an opportunity, or maybe trying to be preventative, a preventative strike. Anyways, this time, the people of Israel don't rely on the ark. They call on Samuel to call on Yahweh for them. And Yahweh, God of Israel, uses thunder. It's interesting because Baal was the god of thunder. So it's kind of, again, showing Yahweh is greater than Baal, who's the true God of gods, who's more powerful. Philistines are routed. Samuel memorializes. He sets up a monument calling it Ebenezer. There's a few older hymns will reference Ebenezer. And again, it's part of this. We've lost a little bit of this, I'd say, in the church, kind of, you could call it biblical literacy. That's not always the best term, but just what these Old Testament in particular references, names mean. And so Ebenezer literally means stone of help. And so it's kind of a memorial of how God helped them up to this point. And that's part of the kind of the cue and part of the message here in this chapter. The victory of this generation, the victory over the Philistines here, was not a victory that was going to guarantee victory in the future. It wasn't that, okay, now you've beat the Philistines, you'll always beat the Philistines. Or now you won this battle, now you're going to win every battle. This was a reminder of God's victory so that in the future, they could look to the past and remember that reliance on God had won victory for them. And that's something each generation, each of us, each day, each week need to remember. It's also just of note that this battle takes place at the same place where the previous two defeats 20 years earlier had taken place. And then we see this note that in the days of Samuel, the Philistines would no longer be a threat. But as we'll see in chapter 14, in Saul's day, when Saul took leadership, the Philistines again there's just this continual war between these people. Again, and victory or defeat had nothing to do with the military power of Philistines versus Israel. And it's whether or not Israel would rely on God. So here's the thing I want to encourage you to consider and reflect on and maybe do something about. What is your Ebenezer? Maybe it's not a literal stone, but what is something, what is a memento, what is an object that you can have or you have in your life that you could look to, that you can, have it up on the mantle, or you have that you can look at, and it is a memorial, it is a reminder of God's victory in some circumstance in your past when you relied on God and you saw his power work, or you saw his grace operative, something that reminds you of victory that God has brought to your life. And you could put it in a place of prominence. You could keep it in the drawer beside your bed. Doesn't matter where you keep it, but know where it is. And when you're struggling, to just trust that God can bring victory in whatever you're facing today or the tomorrows ahead. You can go to the mantle, you can go to your drawer, and you can pick it up, you can hold it, you can look at it, and it's something solid to remind you of God's victory and God's power. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord be gracious to you. And today would you know his peace. God bless.